It's not about the size of the lens that matters. It's how you use it. Hi, do you stream? Do you want good background music but don't want DMCA? That makes sense. Use StreamBeats. It's got over 600 tracks, all these different genres. They're all free right from Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever you use. Plus, we've got a rock album coming out next week that sounds like this. I'll put the Spotify links in the description down below. If you're using a different streaming service, just search Harris Heller. Thanks. Back to the video. We're gonna do this Devin Nash style, all right? Camera lenses. We got 3 lenses here. We've got the stock lens, the kit, they call it the kit lens. And that is a 15 to 45 millimeter. So this is, just to make it simple, this number is the zoom, okay? Millimeter is the focal length. So the focal length of this camera, of this lens, is 14. Let me just show you again what it looks like. This is 14 to 45. This, or sorry, 15 to 45. So this is 15 mil, zoomed into 45. 45 mil, back to 15 mil. That's what that means, okay? The millimeter is the focal length or the zoom of the camera. Lower number equals wider shot. Higher number equals more zoom. The other number is F, 3.5 to 6.3. Okay, this is the aperture. If I were to show you aperture, it is this. It's the iris. It's the iris of the lens, okay? The lower the f-stop, the wider the aperture. So that does 2 things. Not only does that let in more and more light. So when it's wider and it's wide open like this, obviously it's more light can enter. So you get much more low light, much better low light options, right? You're not going to get as much grain that happens when you get to really low light, because you can suck in more light onto your lens. But also that wider aperture allows you to have a much more shallow depth of field. So you can see the wider the aperture, the blurrier the background is. You close it up, you start getting more detail in the background. This is going to be something like an f20. This is going to be something like an f2, maybe f1 point something, f2, depends on the focal length. Aperture, iris of the lens. Lower number equals wider iris. Wider iris means more lights, better in low light, and blurrier background. Higher number equals narrow iris. If you have a lot of light on the subject, the advantage of this is sharper image. Oh, this is cool. This is cool. The point of focus is right here around the 12th fret. You can see as it closes up, the entire guitar is in focus. So these are just 2 completely different styles. Sometimes you want a really cool shallow depth of field look. Sometimes you want the whole thing to be in focus, like if you're doing landscape shots, right? But if you're doing landscape shots where you're shooting a lake and a mountain, you want everything to be in focus. Fortunately, those shots usually have a lot of light because you're outdoors and you got this big thing in the sky called the sun, which happens to send a lot of light down into your lens. It's really nice, really convenient. Really appreciate the sun. Whoever invented that was really smart. But then you get these really cinematic shots and you go with something like this that gets your background really blurry while you're in focus. A lot of streamers want something like this. So a lot of streamers, if you're looking for a lens, you're gonna wanna look for something with a really low aperture because it's gonna open that lens real wide for 2 reasons. One, look at my blurry background. It looks nice, doesn't it? Doesn't that look great? That's what the wider aperture does. Also, most people are streaming in dark areas. If I was using f16, the background would not only be really sharp, just like me, but you'd also get a lot of that noise, that fuzziness, because there's not a lot of light in this room. It's a dark room. So wide apertures work really well for streamers. But there's one other thing. There's one other thing. We talk about the blurry background, right? The shallow depth of field. It's not just the aperture that does this. Higher focal length equals blurrier background. The more you zoom in, the blurrier the background gets. That's just the nature of a lens. The blurrier the background gets. So you can have 2 lenses. This one's my wide angle one is a 14 mil, so it's super wide. My narrow one here is 35 mil, so much more zoomed in. Even if they're the same aperture, I'm gonna get a much blurrier background from this camera just because it's more zoomed in. So those are the two things that give you a blurry background. A higher focal length, a more zoomed in lens will get you a blurrier background, and a lower or a wider aperture will get you a blurrier background right here. So we're looking at the kit lens right here, right? You can see it's not super blurry. We're at 16 mil right now. Now we're at 15 mil. We're at 15 mil, but it also only goes down to f3.5. So you don't get a super blurry background. Memorize this image. Memorize how blurry the headstock of this guitar is. Memorize how blurry my name is, okay? Ready for this? Exact same focal length. The only difference here is that instead of f3.5, we're opening it all the way up to f1.4. Look how blurry my background is now. Can you even read? Can you read my name? Sigma lens, 16 millimeter. It doesn't have a zoom. The last one was 15 to 45. That means it can zoom. This is a zoom lens. The widest it can go is 15. The narrowest it can go is 45. This is a 16 mil only. There is no zoom on this lens. This is the only look that we are going to get. Okay. Important you know that what that means. That is called a prime lens. When it doesn't zoom, it's called a prime lens. When you don't have something like zoom, you don't have all those moving parts inside the lens. What you're able to do is you're able to get those higher numbers, that super low. You're always going to get a lower aperture out of a prime lens than out of a zoom lens. Almost always, because you don't have to worry about what happens when it shifts. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, by the way, when it says 3.5 to 6.3, what that means is it's 3.5 at 15 millimeters. But when you zoom all the way into to 45 millimeters, it goes to 6.3. So as you zoom in, this goes from 3.5 to 6.3. So you can't get 45 millimeter 3.5. When you're at 45 millimeter, the lowest you can get is 6.3. That is what happens when you get a prime lens. You can get those super low apertures and you get that super blurry background, right? Like this looks nice. And what's crazy? So we're gonna put another lens on here. Let me show you what lens this is. Sigma 16 millimeter. This is a $400 lens. Just to give you an idea, this lens right here, this is a Canon RF lens. And keep in mind, it is a much higher end lens. It's a full frame lens, very fancy. This lens, this is a $2,300 lens. And this one only goes down to 2.8. This one is $400, goes all the way down to f1.4. This is a very specified lens. When you have prime lenses, you get lower apertures and they're cheaper. You have to have a bajillion moving parts. It gets a lot more expensive and you can't get as low of an aperture. If this is all you're trying to get, if all you're trying to get is a mounted stream camera, this is amazing. Look at this lens one more time. We're gonna swap it out. I want you to burn this lens into your brain, what this looks like. We're gonna swap it out with another Canon lens. Do you see what this is? Who can tell me what kind of lens this is? It's an 11 to 22. 11 to 22. That is a super wide lens. I would probably call this a good vlogging lens. When you're vlogging, you're holding the camera at arm's length. You want it to be super wide. You don't want your vlog to be just your face. The point is people need to see what you're looking at. Something that goes as wide as 11 mil is pretty great for vlogging. 11 millimeters, it's at f4, right? At 22 millimeters, it's gonna be 5.6. So the variable rate is not too much. It's not too high, right? It doesn't change that much. So this is a 22 mil lens, and you'll notice that even though it's zoomed in further than the 16 mil, which should make it blurrier, the background is not nearly as blurry. And that's because right now, this is only going out to f5.6, where our last one was 1.4. However, if we were to zoom this all the way out to f11, this is one of the ways you can get a super wide angle lens on your stream, is this Canon one right here. You want to get, especially if you're on a crop sensor camera. So this lens here, this is the exact same price as that Sigma 16 mil. Literally the exact same price, even though you don't get that blurry background, you don't get as good of a streaming look from it. But that's because the other lens is a prime lens. So they both have their advantages. If you were to vlog, I would say absolutely pick this. You could get multiple different kinds of shots. You could zoom in for effect. You can go super wide while you're walking around handheld, right? This is a much more versatile lens. Whereas the other one, the exact same price, only gives you 16 mil. That's the only thing it gives you. You only get 16 mil with that other one. You get a much better looking 16 mil, but that's all you get. Let's add some things. You want cheap lens. What do? Prime lens will be better bang for buck, but less versatile. What just happened there? You want blurry background, lower aperture, higher focal length. Oh, remember that? Remember? Focal length is zoom. The higher the focal length, the higher the number, the more zoom, right? Equals bigger blur. Want vlog lens? Wide. On a crop sensor camera like the Sony A6400 or A5100 or M200, any of these have a smaller sensor, by the way. We haven't talked about that at all because this is all about lenses, but just know basically the digital film, right? It's what the image lands on. It's what captures the actual image itself. That's the sensor. It's a digital film. A crop sensor is just a smaller one. That's all it means. But that means if you have a lens, if the lens gives you this image, because the lens is circular, a full frame will take this picture. A crop sensor will give you this picture, meaning a 24 mil, this one right here, this is actually 35 mil. This 35 mil on my full frame camera looks the exact same as a 24 mil on a crop sensor camera. You don't get as wide of an image. So that's why I'm saying on a crop sensor camera, maybe you want, let's say 11. Let's put 11. 11 millimeters looked really good. Let's even say 12. We'll say 12. Widest equals 12. That's probably what you want to aim for. If you can go lower to the 11, 12 or 11. Full frame, say 16 millimeters, pretty standard. This is my old vlogging. It's got a weird little like teeth thing on it. It's what we put on. It's what I put on my my Canon or my YouTube camera, and it goes to 16 mil. This is a vlogging lens, and it's a 16 to 35. 16 to 35 is pretty standard. If you're on a wide angle, 16 is what you're looking for. This is pretty much what you need to know. This is the takeaway from all this. So I'm sure you've noticed that a couple videos lately have all been recorded on stream rather than like this, and that's because we've been spending pretty much all of our time the last couple weeks on the upcoming Stream Beats Rock album release that's happening on November 19th. Plus the videos were still pretty good, so yeah, you're welcome. But just a reminder that Stream Beats has over 200,000 monthly users, and not a single one of them has gotten a DMCA strike. So again, links down below to Stream Beats. Keep an eye out for the Stream Beats Rock release. It's going to be amazing, if I do say so myself. And if you'd like to download the tracks to use in your YouTube videos, you can jump in the Stream Beats Discord, also linked down below, and you can download them from there. Love you guys. Hope this helped, and as always, happy streaming.